Hey everyone, we've all been faced with a time or two, whether it's a fun vacation, tournament, going out of state for a fishing trip, where we've had to go explore new waters and find fish and find bass quickly and try to see results very fast. And that's all we're going to talk about tonight. Is we're going to talk about how to use tools, technology, and all the arrows in your quiver on how you can break down new water fast and get on fish and have fun. And that's what we all want to do on the water is have fun fishing. And to help things out tonight is Tilo. Trevor, what's going on?
What's up? Thanks for having me.
I mean, maybe you like to just go out and like just watch birds and and not catch fish and just kind of take in nature. But I don't know. Sometimes it's more fun to actually catch them. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. It's kind of been a theme of the last couple of years. I haven't been fishing all that much, having some boat issues, and then now with a 1 year old daughter, it's just I don't want to say fishing's taking a back seat, but that's just kind of seasonality of life, I guess. So I like to
Yeah,
catch them when
and
I
I think
can.
that to the point is right now you're maybe rewind 5 years ago you were had all the time in the water to go out and enjoy the birds and the scenery and catch a few bass along the way, and now you're going to be like, I got 2 hours to go catch bass. I want to catch them now, right? So like it that all relates for sure.
hmm Yeah, it's a completely different change of pace. Definitely, I think back 5 years ago. It was fishing, 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 wasn't married, no kids, guiding full time. So even on the days that I wasn't, taking clients out, I was out there just trying to catch them, trying to find them so that I could put my clients on fish. So definitely understand that notion for sure.
And as your little future co-angler gets a little older, and she's like, Dad, I want to go catch a bass, then you're like, now the pressure's really on. Like, their attention span is really short. So like if you're gonna go out, you want to like have results. So
For sure. Yeah. I guess the only argument I have there is she probably wouldn't be a paying client. So I guess we could potentially struggle a little bit more.
yeah, time is money. So
Time is money. So
all right, lots of familiar faces in the chat. What's going on, everybody? Looks like Brian says looks good, sounds good. So we're off to the races. Dustin's not in the prison tonight. He gets to watch right away. So tonight's stream is presented by Arsenal Fishing and boosted by Powerhouse Lithium. And we got Trevor, former classic Bassmaster Classic qualifier, Trevor Lo.
yeah, yeah. Shortly after the Earth crusted over, but it still kind of feels like yesterday for sure.
For sure. But there's I think there's only what, I don't know what the number is, like 400 or 500 anglers in the world that have ever fished the Bassmaster Classic or something like that. It's only a few hundred.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It's a special thing, especially being from Minnesota. I think there's like less than 10 that have made it from Minnesota, so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of good company to be in. Obviously, I probably finished the worst out of all of them, but hey, fish the classic.
It was good advice. Lost and tackle. It's okay to use the cheap diapers during the day, but you go for the name brand ones at night.
It's good to know. Appreciate that little uh, uh, wisdom there.
Absolutely. So you made the classic through the college, and when you guys won the national championship, right? That was on Lake Dubay in
Yeah,
Wisconsin. I
Stevens
assume,
Point. Yeah.
was that new water to you at the time?
It was. It's crazy. I tell people when I fished the classic, that was the 12th tournament I'd fished in my lifetime, which is just unbelievable to think you go for. And that's including like small little pickup, uh, Saturday morning pickups in these local clubs or local groups. That's not even like organized Minnesota Bass Nation, Bass Federation, anything like that.
Hmm.
That's including all these tiny little pickups. So definitely fishing Wisconsin water was completely new to me. Wasn't super familiar with river systems and that sort of deal. But had a buddy who kind of showed me the ropes on that stuff, and yeah, made the most of it and won the college bracket.
Very cool. So, do you have any tricks up your sleeve for like conquering new waters in college? Like,
So a lot.
what was your back then? Right, rewind. I don't know. Was that how long? 8 years ago, something
eight
like
years
that.
ago, 2015. Yeah.
So,
I
what were your go-tos as a semi-avid novice college angler when you were going to these new waters for college?
Yeah, it's crazy to think back to that. I watched, some of the footage from that ESPN2 show that they put together for that. And I mean, I'm throwing like a spinning rod with straight fluoro, like no hate towards anybody who runs straight fluoro on their spinning reels, but just like I would never do that nowadays. It's always braid to a fluoro leader or something like that. And it's crazy to think back to how inexperienced I was fishing that tournament, but everything's still going right for me. And I think a lot of what helped me was looking at like Google Earth and knowing that it's a river system. Obviously, smallmouth are going to want to be around current breaks, any sort of like eddies, so that they can ambush bait fish, prey, anything like that as it's coming down the wash. But I mean, a lot of that is just your standard, typical textbook knowledge stuff, and I think you don't really understand what to do on a particular body of water until you get out there and actually fish it. So what I was looking for specifically on that particular bay or not bay pool was outside bends in the main channel because those are the ones that are going to get hit hardest by the current. It's going to have steeper drops, that sort of stuff. And without having any sort of experience on that particular body of water, if I could, find that through mapping, and then just try to figure out which of those outside turns has cover on it, whether it's lay downs, whether it's wing dams or hard bottom of that sort of thing, that I figured that would be my high percentage areas per se.
Yeah, very cool. Yes, we're gonna. I mean, tonight's show, a couple things on the agenda. I think we're gonna. Breaking news: the Bassmaster Elite Series schedule for 2024 came out today. So I think, as both avid fans of the Bassmasters and the and pro fishing, we'll probably touch on that, and then we're going to dig into some of the tools and techniques that we both like to use for researching new bodies of water. Whether that's going down to Grand Lake, Oklahoma for the first time fishing the Bassmaster Classic, or meeting buddies for a bachelor weekend at a lake at a cabin that you never seen before, or go fishing a club tourney or a team event or anything like that. So it all kind of applies, and we'll touch on that. And that's going to be kind of the focus of the show. What do you think? Should we talk elite schedule first?
Yeah, I'm
Get
good
that
with
out of the
that.
way. I'm guessing there's a lot of people that would be interested in that.
Yeah, I think that just dropped earlier today, right?
Yeah, I think I saw it at like sometime after lunch, maybe.
Yeah, I think I was right around noon.
I don't know if I really
Yeah,
like this view. I think I like the social media view here. Let me find a different image of this instead of the scrolling. We'll just find the. Oh, look, Chris Zaldane is pandering on Twitter, getting polls on whether front-facing sonar should be used or not.
that's a that's just a can of worms that's never going to go away. I feel like. I think,
I was actually on a podcast last night, the Midwest Angler podcast, talking about that a little bit.
yeah,
But
yeah, that seems to be the talk of the town. I think, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, it's just another tool to catch fish. Some people are going to say that you can't catch fish without it. These anglers aren't able to catch fish without it, and others are going to say, well, look at them; they've been catching fish for years without it. So I don't know. I think technology is constantly innovating, and I think I don't. I haven't seen, unless somebody can show me, statistical data that's showing that these fisheries are just getting completely demolished because of forward-facing sonar. At this time, I don't see that there's an issue with it.
sure, yeah, I don't. I have opinions. I'll probably come out with like a video standalone on that and deep dive on that a little bit. So here's the schedule for 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series, fresh out. And I almost wonder if some of the feedback and ripples caused them to maybe like rejuggle some things, or maybe I don't know. Maybe it was just like venue and negotiations, or maybe they're trying to think like, how could we retool this to maybe like, I guess, limit front-facing impact by how they did the schedule. I don't know. Who knows? Or maybe they wanted to let BPT MLF go first, and they were going to go after. I don't know. So interesting. The first thing that jumps out at me is that we're starting in Texas and not Florida, which is to me a little bit nice change of pace. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, I think that was probably the first thing that stuck out to me too, especially with it being Toledo. Toledo's always in like the top 10 of Bassmasters, top 100. And yeah, Tyler says seems like a heavy forward-facing schedule. It definitely does. That's another thing that I noticed too is a lot of these fisheries aren't grass fisheries per se. You're not going to be fishing grass all that much, but then again, those are very specific bodies of water, especially down in the south. You know, a lot of it is man-made reservoirs and that sort of deal. So, yeah, I think Toledo is probably going to be forward-facing sonar. Fork, Grand, Harris Chain might not be. Depends on their approach to it, because you look at Okeechobee this year. My good buddy Tyler won it in a canal while everybody else is fishing, a football field sized area. But yeah, and a lot of these other lakes, Murray, Wheeler, Smith, I think those are going to be your standard brush pile stuff, fishing spotted bass potentially.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting because I look at the first two, and I think those are going to be pre-spawn into spawn. So I think that's going to will forward-facing play. I do believe they will, but I don't think it's going to dominate. Like there will be guys that do well, but I also think there are guys that will absolutely catch them on square bills and chatterbaits and like just fishing. So I think you're going to see a pretty, I think like Seminole, right? Like Seminole, yes, was at one on forward facing sonar, but the rest of the top 10, I guess most of the other top 10 outside of, I guess, Fujita was kind of doing some, kind of not doing some, but a lot of the other guys were fishing. And I think you'll see balance in those first two. I like that we're going to Texas instead of Florida. Shakes things up. We got a little bit of grass, but they're not like huge grass lakes. They're and there's a lot of stumps and lumber and things like that. So I think that sometimes, especially that time of year in the spring, I don't think you get a lot of fish suspended above and out from the stumps. Like when Walters dominated, that was in the fall, and right, the fish are loose to that kind of cover. This time of year, I expect them to be like right tight to stumps and things like that. So I think that to some degree will limit the dominance of front-facing sonar. So I think those will be good events, and obviously Fork in late February, March is going to be an absolute crush fest, right? That's
yeah,
I mean,
100%.
probably half a dozen century belts are getting handed out unless they have just crazy bad weather.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think you'll even find some guys that are like flipping bushes up in creeks, for spawners and that sort of deal. And my guess is, it's going to be dirtier water. You're not going to be, sight fishing per se. And yeah, if you're flipping bushes, I don't know how much forward facing sonar you're using, but I mean, was it Santee Cooper this year? Was it Luke Palmer that was using it on cypress trees? So you never know. I think, like I said, forward facing sonar is going to be that argument, that can of worms that gets opened in every tournament this year, whether it's one on live scope or not. So
yeah, absolutely. Grand Lake 50-50 coin. I mean, if they're on a jerkbait bite, then forward facing sonar is going to play. But they also could be a big spinnerbait bite. So I mean, that one I would say falls in the same bucket as the first three. You're going to see it. I mean, kind of like, I guess this year, right? Like Gussie won heavy electronics, but most of the other top 10, it wasn't really a factor.
Yeah, and
Harris
I don't think.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just don't think there's well, and I could be completely wrong on this, but I don't see Grand being a setting where somebody's going to be hanging a bait from the front of the boat and catching fish. I think that time of year is going to be that spawn deal. Guys are going to be power fishing, throwing a square bill down the bank or a spinner bait, like you said, or if the water's clear enough, they can work a jerk bait. But I don't see it where guys potentially run to the dam and catch these pelagic fish that are just feeding on school and bait fish.
Yeah, and then April, 2 stops in Florida. I think those will be offshore tournaments. That's post spawn. I think you're going to see shell beds and that kind of stuff. So I definitely think it's going to offshore. I don't have a good feel. I mean, at least Harris chain, heavy grass. So I don't know. Oftentimes in Minnesota, heavy grass somewhat neutralizes largemouth live scope. Does it play? Does it help you understand where the fish are and the bluegill? But like true sniping is not typically a huge thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is a factor to some degree. St. John's River current, again, I think it could be a factor, but I think there'll be a lot. I think that's going to be really interesting. Fishing St. John's later in the year, I think will make for an interesting tournament to watch on live. I think we're going to see things that we don't normally see being a non-spawn tournament on the St. John's.
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me of Cayuga back in the day when I think it was Greg Hackney or something, targeting, grass clumps with a big Strike King jig. So maybe forward facing sonar just shows where those big grass clumps are, but they're not necessarily sniping fish with it. But that's that would be kind of my guess if they're going to be targeting offshore grass and that sort of deal. But yeah, it's not going to be your standard get up in the back canals and catch bedded fish.
Yeah. What the tournaments they'll be fishing the bank or shallow water the most? I think Toledo Bend, Grand, and probably those two.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, maybe Fork. I'm not really sure. Shallow. So I think Murray, if it's a herring spawn, front facing sonar will be leveraged to find bait and see where they're running fish, but they're not going to be sniping them. They're going to be using it to stay on top of the fish so they can be positioned when they come up and boil and when they're schooling. So they're not going to be like sniping fish, but they're going to be watching for activity so they can get their baits in top waters and keep them in high percentage spots. I would love to see Lake Murray be a full blown herring spawn type because like I have fond memories of like early elites of like 2008 2010 Clark's Hill when they would hit those on the herring spawns and just guys throwing those big pencil poppers and those big just those are wild events to watch on live when those top water herring bites go down.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's super exciting to see. Everybody loves seeing topwater, and yeah, like you said, fond memories. I fished Smith back in 2016, my first run in the opens, and I remember it was just a completely different world to me catching fish in 115 feet of water, and catching them on a Vision 110 and catching them on a Zara Spook and that sort of deal, and it was just like you would see standing timber, 60 to 80 feet tall, and these fish would be just suspended at the top of that timber, and then you just see big balls of bait in the middle of the water column, and these fish would come up 20, 30 feet just to eat, and it's super cool. And I think, we don't, Minnesotans or us Northerners, we don't get to experience that very often. So if we can see that happening, like I said, I think it'd be cool to, showcase that screencast of somebody's graph as they're in 110 feet of water or something like that, but they're catching them on top water.
Absolutely. Wheeler, I think, will be a ledge tournament. And, if they're really pulling current, I don't know that front facing sonar will dominate. It will definitely be a factor. So I think Wheeler has the chance to not, I mean, it'll play, but I think that'll be more of a side imaging, like, kind of ledge fest type thing. And with only 100 boats, I think Wheeler will fish pretty big. It fished pretty small when they were there, I think in May this year for the Opens with 225 boats. With 100 boats, I think Wheeler has the potential to be a pretty good tournament in June for those guys.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Wheeler, but yeah, to your point, I remember the Opens was there, and it just sounded everybody that I talked to, it was just like everywhere you went, there was like 6, 7 boats on you, and so hopefully that's not the case with a smaller field, but yeah.
But I didn't hear a lot of people talking about. I mean, there was definitely fish caught front-facing sonar, but even the guy that won it, I don't remember him toting that he's a hummingbird guy, mega live, right? I don't really. Adam Rasmussen was more fishing ledges and humps and shell beds and stuff, and waiting for the current to move and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So And then the last three, I think, will be primarily forward-facing sonar tournaments.
Yep. Yeah. And like I said, with forward facing sonar, that argument's always going to be there, especially if you're fishing smallmouth, Champlain, St. Lawrence. But um, I would venture to guess a ton of these um, agreements and proposals to go and visit these venues were put in place before the events this year on those two lakes. So all that negative feedback is just like, I don't know, what can you do? These
Yeah.
venues were already selected beforehand. So oh well,
And
just
this is
enjoy
an
the big smallmouth.
unpopular opinion, but I think 3 northern events is too much. Even as a northern person, I think if you just look at and you probably have the sales data to support this at Omnia, but like demographic wise, we don't represent 33% of the Bassmaster subscriber fan base. So we probably don't need 3 northern smallmouth fisheries on the tournament.
Yeah,
Guys
but
in Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi get bored with big smallmouth events. And do they need to be on the schedule? Yes. But I think 2 is the right number. I think 3 is too much.
yeah, I think you're probably accurate in saying that. But one thing that I will note is like we've been looking through sales data, and even during these smallmouth events, you'll see influxes of sales come in for these quote unquote smallmouth baits from customers in Texas and Florida and
Mhm.
that sort of deal, and trying to implement those strategies that they're seeing uh, down in Florida, because it could potentially give them a leg up because these fish aren't seeing the typical Carolina rig with a 8-inch lizard or 10XD or something like that, a big football jig. So, and especially, with forward facing sonar, I feel like we keep talking about forward facing sonar. Guys are finessing fish in Florida and in Texas a lot more frequently than they have been in the past. You look at Tyler Vet, Cifuentes, and those guys. They're who would have thought you could win a an Okeechobee tournament fishing in the canal throwing a jerk bait. That's just not how it's done down there. And I think with people getting more and more acquainted with forward facing sonar, getting more experience with it, you're going to see a lot of these different techniques that are technically deemed northern techniques start to play in the South a lot more.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it, but I get there's a lot of people that just are disinterested by smallmouth across the country. So I think this is more balanced. And I think this is a good point, AJ. I think lacrosse is a good crossover. It's a northern fishery that most of the country can relate to. And I think to some degree Champlain up until this year used to be like that as well. You used to see topwater smallmouth and people flipping grass and doing all kinds of things. And this year, none of that played. And they're going back
Mm-hmm.
basically the same time this year. So I don't see that changing next year. So those last 2 will look a lot like they did this year, to be honest. This is a good question here. Sean says he wants to marshal 2. He can't do Toledo. He went to New York last time. So of those, where would you marshal? I think for me, I would go Murray for sure. Murray looks like a fascinating lake to go, and I think as a marshal, I think you're going to see a lot, and it probably would be one of the. There's a good chance you're going to watch somebody slinging swim baits and top waters for, 3 to 5 pounders, and that probably would be pretty fun to watch as an observer. Um, I think Lake Fork would be a fun one because that would be an interactive event, right? You're going to be a marshal slash judge. You're going to be weighing fish, entering them in part of Score Tracker. So if you're up for a little work, a little more interactive, I'd go Murray and Fork, and my wild card would be St. John's.
It's funny you picked 3 that I would not have picked. I have a
Okay.
soft spot, obviously, for places that I've been to. Grand, if you could marshal the classic, go marshal the classic. The classic morning takeoff is unlike anything you have ever been a part of. And there you go, Pete. Smith was going to be my second one. Smith Lake is a gorgeous lake to be on. You're talking about the scenery there. And yeah, as a marshal, obviously you're not fishing it, but man, it's it's got some incredible scenery on Smith Lake. You know, they've got the castle there, or the house that they deem as the castle on Smith Lake, and just incredible, um, just scenery. You know, the way that lake snakes around. So really, really cool place to be.
Yeah, there you go. So two different perspectives there for you, Sean, and you can decide who's right. Overall, though, I think not a lot of new places, but I think places at new times a year, and places we haven't been in a minute. So I think overall, I give it at least a B plus for schedule.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I dig it. I'm not, I don't get too hung up on, I'm a fan of the sport. You know, if I can see guys go catch fish, that's more of what it is. I think, if it's constantly the same place over and over and over and over again, that gets a little old. But uh just seeing guys catch fish and trying to understand or trying to better learn different parts of the country and understand different fisheries. I mean, I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, and see how they break down water, how they attack it, so we can learn and
Yep,
add
exactly.
to what we're going to talk about in a minute here. So we're going to have a quick little word from the dream team, and then we're going to come back with tricks and tips and tools for how to find bass fast on new waters.
Are you ready to reel in your next home purchase or refinance? Supreme Lending's Dream Team can help guide you through the entire mortgage process, from pre-qualification to closing. We have a wide variety of home loan programs in our tackle box, including down payment assistance and first-time homebuyer options. You can ask HellaBass. He trusted us to help finance his home. Contact the Dream Team today by searching Supreme Lending Dream Team, or click the link below in the description, or scan the QR code on your screen.
All right, there's your hookup for when you need a bigger place with a bigger garage, Trevor.
Sounds good. I'll make sure to contact HellaBass like it instructed
That's
me to.
that's actually, I don't, you know who Aaron Dagus is? Fishes with
The
Corey
name
Brandt
rings
and
a
the Team
bell.
Trail. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's his
yeah.
company. So, yep.
Oh, okay.
So he's a Minnesota bass head for sure. So
Yeah,
it's cool to support a company that's willing to support bass fishing and is interested in bass fishing. So,
for sure.
um, but yeah, let's talk tips and tricks. And you've got some experience in college going to new waters. You fished the Classic, which was new waters at one point. You've dabbled in the opens. You've obviously guided and fished locally in Minnesota. So you've got a lot of perspectives, and I've traveled a fair amount. So I think between the two of us, we can dole out some good tips and opportunities and some of the things that we've done all the time, and walk through some of the newer tools that we're using as we get new tools and new things to play with as technology improves and presented options out there.
Yeah, I think that's right. Kind of like you texted me earlier. Don't go look at my Bassmaster finishes. It's not impressive. But yes, I have had the chance to go and fish some of these world class fisheries and experience them and try to break them down and yeah, I guess start from scratch per se. And not have dots and waypoints and all sorts of information given to me. So it's definitely a learning experience. But yeah, I think you and I both have enough experience that we could kind of glean some or provide some insight to people.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes when things come easy and you have success, you don't learn as much as, the school of hard knocks sometimes gives you harder, faster lessons at times. So just because you don't go out and kill them doesn't mean you didn't learn a ton and things that you would do differently now going back to Smith Lake than you did the first time, and how you would research it and what you would have paid attention to, um, goes a long ways as well. So I think, like, for me, most of the time when I'm going fishing to new waters, typically it resolves around a tournament. But I think, and that's probably the same for you, Trevor, I would imagine. But there are times that we go meet buddies and go to places, or get the in-laws book a cabin somewhere and you end up on a strange lake and you got to break down. But typically for me, it's a tournament. But I think all these things apply, whether you're fun fishing, a bachelor weekend, or whatever. I think all these tools apply. But because it's tournament focused for me, usually one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to like do some Google searches, some Facebook searches, uh, you know, and look for some kind of tournament results, so I can get a feel for the time of year am I going. Is this like a 25-pound a day lake? Is this a 12-pound a day lake? What is like good fishing there? And that tells me a few things, right? Is if I'm in a tournament situation, it tells me like, what do I need to find to be competitive? Am I looking for brown? Am I looking for green? But also, like, even when you're fun fishing, it's nice to know like what's good, right? Like, I think if you go to a lake for fun and you know it has giants and you go and catch a bunch of 13 inchers, it's like, oh, it was kind of fun, but like I know 5 and 6 pounders live here. But on the flip side, if you know people are only catching their win in terms of 13 pounds, you can just like, hey, if I'm getting bites, I'm doing the right thing. So that's where I typically uh, start with, and then from there, if I can gather any data on like species, forage, does it have smallmouth? Does it have spot? Does it largemouth? What do those creel surveys look like? That kind of stuff. Minnesota DNR in Minnesota, where the Minnesota Lake Finder is a wealth of information as far as like, are there bullheads in there? Are there sunfish? Are there perch? Are there tilapia? Are there Cisco's? Like that kind of stuff. So those are the couple of the first places just to get like, okay, what kind of lake is this? And then look at a map of some kind just to kind of get a feel like, is this a 500-acre lake? Is it 5,000? Is it 100 feet deep? Is it 10 feet deep? That's kind of the basic stuff. Do you have anything to add on high level?
No, I think that's right. A lot of, looking up tournament results, kind of to your point, understanding how much weight you would need to be competitive or to have a shot at winning, unless the lake is just fishing completely off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, yeah, you'll definitely kind of get a feel for how that lake is fishing. One thing that I do definitely look for is I'm a big fan of just looking at like Google Earth.
Sure. Yep. That's a good one.
Some stuff that I like to look for, especially if it's I try to look for the opposite of what the water body is. For example, if it's a lake, a small 500-acre lake or something like that, if I can find like a creek that runs into it, that's going to be pushing in current, or it's going to be, drawing in, I don't know, bait fish or that sort of stuff, oxygenated water. If I can find something like that, some oddball stuff, that's kind of what I look for as well. If it's a river system, if I can find some backwater that might be a little stagnant, where largemouth might get into a little bit, so they're not constantly fighting current. Those are kind of some oddities that I kind of look for on Google Earth. Anything that kind of sticks out terrain wise, not so much with what color the water is or where lily pads or so on and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Google Earth is good, or even Google Map. I mean, like Google Earth, Google Maps, like that stuff's good. It gives you, it's like, is this a highly developed lake? Is there like 10,000 docks? Is there 10 docks? Is it mostly swamp? Is it a lot of wood? Like you can kind of get a feel like, is there going to be a lot of laydowns? Is there going to be a lot of like emergent vegetation? It gives you kind of a vibe of what that lake looks like before you get there, and you can start visioning like, what is it going to look like? What is this the kind of lake I'm going to be slinging a buzzbait and a speed worm around, or is this kind of a lake that I'm going to be like out dragging Ned rigs and finesse tactics? Creeks, culverts. A lot of times you can see on Google Earth, like if it looks like there's a little delta or like some sand, you can kind of see like, is there really a creek there, or is it actually something that's active that actually pushes water? That can be really good. And little sneak holes and things like that, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to that point, mixing that and partnering that with, your map, obviously your contour map, just to see if, hey, this looks kind of good on satellite. I wonder what it looks like pulling up a contour map, whether it's on your fish finder, if it's on an app or something like that.
Yeah.
Whatever you use.
I mean, 10 years ago, right? Like 10, 15 years ago, I was like ordering hotspots maps and paper maps off the internet before I would go someplace typically, or like, or if it was a Minnesota tournament, we'd be like opening up like a Minnesota map book and trying to like glean it that way. And now it's more likely that I'm going to pull up, the one, what is it, the One Boat Network app, or an avionics app, or hop in my boat and and turn the power on and like scroll the Lake Master, things like that. For sure, like in most recent years, would be more likely to start kind of looking around at that kind of stuff. But it's getting a little more easier with apps and websites and things like that to do some of that research on your phone or on your mobile device, things like that. That's probably more normal, during commercials or if your wife makes you watch like, baking shows or British television at night and you're not really interested, you can kind of do some map study on your phone or something like that. I'm sure you don't have to deal with things like that, but
That's I don't think that's my wife's flavor of television. I think
but
as
there's
of
some
right now,
equivalent
it's
in your life that is like,
eh, The Bachelor, Bachelorette, that sort of stuff. But
sure, okay.
no, I definitely will try to get off the couch from watching that as much as I can.
Or
So
you can like hold hands with one hand and then be like
there you go.
on your phone looking at your next tournament like in the other.
Yeah, yeah, and to that point, I think I'll stuff that I used to try to dig up on the internet too was just like old maps and stuff that you can find through like I don't even know how to word it. I don't want to say like government databases, but
Sure.
figure out where
Corps of
old road
Engineers
beds.
maps,
Yeah,
state park
road beds,
maps, like
bridges, exactly. Yep. So yeah, that stuff will help you, especially in those southern reservoirs. I don't think it's going to play too much in these glacier lakes up here in Minnesota, but when you're fishing down south, definitely, you'll be driving over a spot and it's all yellow on the bottom, and all of a sudden it's like a super hard return red, and it's just like, what the heck was that? And sure enough, it's an old road bed or it's an old bridge piling or so on and so forth.
yeah. And like back, 10 plus years ago, before mapping was like even getting good, like the Mississippi River, we used to like go seek out like those flip chart river Corps of Engineer maps. That was like the best thing you could possibly find for the river back
Mm-hmm.
then. And so I don't know. I mean, like technology wise, obviously we'll talk about in a little bit here going like once we get on the water, right? Then there's, how do we attack sonar, side imaging, driving around, that kind of stuff. But now I guess it's a good time to talk about that Omnia has some new tools to kind of, I think, both bridge the gap. At least I've used it a little bit as a like research tool before I go, but it's also a good reference tool once you get on the water. And I think even we can talk about how like it's actually a good post mortem like armchair quarterback after an outing. So I think there's several ways to use the new what do we call Omnia Premium Pro?
Yeah, yeah. No, whoever's listening that's familiar with Omnia, I think a lot of what we built the company on was through fishing reports. So everybody that's familiar with Omnia knows that they can get fishing reports, they can read up on what people were using, how they were catching fish,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. But obviously, the goal is to help anglers catch more fish on their own. Help them learn, help them find success on the water. So the leadership at Omnia has been really, really gung ho about Premium Pro, which is our new app subscription in the Omnia app. And essentially, it provides you with different map layers that you can use. So we've got various layers, obviously, the contour layer, the bottom hardness layer. So now that, if you're on a body of water, you can see through this map layer where or which sections of lake are going to have harder bottom than others. We've got vegetation layers, so you can see if there's going to be any vegetation in a particular bay or a stretch of shoreline that you're fishing. We have weather data as well, so you got wind radar that you can put. And the really cool thing, and we've heard this comment from a lot of people, is, man, I just wish the app that I use for wind, it shows me the direction of the wind based on the barbs and how fast the wind's going to be blowing or hard the wind's going to be blowing. But I wish I could overlay contours on top of that, and now we've got that functionality where you can overlay contours on wind direction, so specifically how a certain point or an offshore hump is getting hit by the wind, and if that's going to position fish in a favorable way for you or an unfavorable way for you. So a lot of really cool stuff coming with Omnia, with the Premium Pro subscription. And we're constantly improving on it. So our dev team's working on it to make improvements every day. And we love feedback from our customers that use it, and we take it to heart, and we implement those changes as we can. So
Sean says he's a fan. Trevor
cool.
says he was hoping we were going to talk about Omnia maps tonight. He said he's really close to pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
So
Trevor, you've got a great name. You spell it wrong, but it's okay.
He mentioned that earlier, that it was good to see a Trevor on live, even if it was spelled differently.
Yeah, it's OR, but it's all right. No, I'm just giving crap. Yeah, so I would definitely, if you haven't, try out the free trial just to get a look at it. And like I said, if there's anything that you would like to change, or if you think that we should make changes, definitely let us know. You can contact our customer service team, and they'll take that, and we always put it to our dev team to make improvements. So you pulled up a screenshot here. I'm curious, do you know what lake this is or where this is?
Knights Point Road. I haven't really studied these. It doesn't seem obvious to me
I'll
based
give
on
you a
looking at it.
clue. It's the Twin Cities premier tournament fishing
So it's
lake.
probably Minnetonka.
Yeah, do you know which bay that is?
I am definitely not a Tonka. That's probably Stubbs.
Nope.
Nope. No, not
Nope.
that's no. I got it wrong. It's the far west bay, though, right?
Yeah, it's Halstead's.
Halstead's. That's what it was.
Yep.
I actually was probably fishing right. I actually fished right here on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's a guy that's got a dock right as you go into the channel between Cooks and Halstead's, right about where you're fishing. He's got like a little
Well, this is actually,
airplane.
isn't this considered priests here?
Yeah, you might be right. I just call it Cooks because it takes you to Cooks. But he's got a little a pole with an airplane on it that spins, I think, with wind direction. But there's always people fishing his dock because they're always catching bluegill off of it. And there's some bass that live under that dock at times too. So.
Sure.
But yeah,
so this is the C map layer. Is that what this is?
Yep.
Or is this the standard map layer?
Yeah, as of right now, we are using CMAP, so that's community-driven data. So the coverage is going to be a little spotty on certain lakes, depending on if CMAP has coverage on that. I don't know if I can speak to the name of the partner that we are going to be working with to get map coverage across the United States, but that is coming in the near future. So we should have coverage on every single lake across the United States. But yeah, you can see the CMAP here. It looks, as you zoom in more, you'll notice that this is just a screenshot. You won't see it, but as you zoom in more, you will see how detailed that CMAP data is. So you've got contour layers here. Let's see. Can I share screen? Is that cool with you? Can I take over the show?
Yeah, we can do that.
So since I'm a Omnia employee, I get access to this on desktop here. But so if we go back to Halstead's, so you can see as you zoom in, the contours get a lot more defined, and you can see, it's not as, I guess, it's a lot more detailed as you zoom in. So it's really good stuff. Like I said, it's community driven. So this is people that are driving over, recording with their sonar. So you can see all the little nooks and crannies of the shoreline here. You can see that this one's real sharp, this point, everything, that sort of deal. So you can see how this little edge right here is a little steeper than this gradual transition there. So,
and I guess maybe let's explain for those that maybe don't know as much about CMAP CMAP formerly Insight Genesis, is that correct?
That sounds right. I believe that's what it was.
And so that was Lowrance's original community driven, and they actually used to hire college kids like Austin Felix, and they'd have competition. And Trevor, you were part of that program back in the day. They would have super incentives, the people that could log the most hours or miles or however they graded it, and you guys would be eligible to win HDS units and things like that. So they got a lot of mapping done.
Yeah, it was super cool. I remember, I didn't have the time that some of these kids did, but there was one superstar kid who won 10 HDS 12s or something like that, just because they would track the total number of acres that you log. And I think he was one of those kids down in, Tennessee River area that just had the time to go up and down Kentucky Lake or whatever lake that was, that he was on, and just do lines all day long. And so, yeah, he won a ton of graphs. I talked to the
Do
CEO.
lines all day long.
Yeah, that sounds really bad.
It didn't sound
Record
right.
tracks all day long. There you go. But yeah, I talked to Matt Johnson, who's the CEO of Omnia, and he was really big into that Inside Genesis program. And so yeah, he had mentioned it.
Well, I
there was
believe
this
he
kid,
started a company called Contour Innovations that then became Insight Genesis, that then
Probably.
became CMAP.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The guy is 100 miles an hour all the time and super gung ho about this stuff. So that wouldn't shock me in the slightest. But yeah, so there was a kid in college that just won a ton of graphs, and yeah, he's off and doing bigger things now. I can't remember what exactly he's doing, but yeah, Matt Johnson is a big fan of his, and they did that for the college years. So really cool.
Yeah. So
way to incentivize.
To that degree, it's a bit of what CMAP hires out to do commercially and also community. So I think it's mainly Lowrance users that power CMAP, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But basically, if you have it enabled, right, you can record, and then I don't know if it's wirelessly. I don't run Lowrance, but like whether it's wirelessly or you pull your chips out and then you upload those chips, but that stuff basically goes up into a cloud, and that cloud goes out, and then you can, I think there are certain CMAP enabled chips where if you just want to have CMAP, right, you can go out and pay a subscription just to get CMAP. And I don't know what the cost of that is. Do you know what CMAP costs?
Not
I bet you
off
it's
the
at
top of
least
my head.
$50 a year or more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
But like to get CMAP, typically you're paying extra. That's a premium thing to get CMAP. So
For sure.
that is something that is, I don't know how often, I don't know if it's daily or weekly or monthly, how often they publish the cloud or republish out that user content, but that is stuff that is literally continuously updated by community. And I think maybe LakeMaster and I think Garmin, they have their own community driven mapping, but I think CMAP is probably the biggest at this point.
Yeah, I think that's right. Humminbird, I believe, has, I don't know, I think it's Auto Chart Live or whatever, but I don't know if that's
if there's a cloud part of it or it's just for your personal.
I don't know if there's a cloud part of it. But yeah, to Nick's point right here, it's $50 to have Lowrance app on his phone. So, with Premium Pro, if you're already a premium subscriber to Omnia, it's an additional $20, and we eat the cost. So what we'll do is we will give you a year subscription of this from the time you upgrade to Premium Pro, and we'll add on that. We'll extend your premium membership on top of that. So we'll eat the cost of that premium membership, so that if your premium membership was going to expire a month from today, you got 11 months for free if you upgrade to Premium Pro today. And that's $20 on top of whatever the 29. So if you're not a premium member, it's $50 for the year. But premium is the best, I think, subscription for tackle purchasing in the entire industry. And to get all this added feature as we continue to go through the different layers, you'll see. I believe that it's 100% worth the extra $20. So,
right. So I mean, but I guess the point is, if you don't see your favorite lake now, or it's not complete, right there, it should be updating continuously, and so like this is an evolving product to get more map and the potential. And I know Dustin said there are things that show up on CMAP for him that he doesn't see on LakeMaster or Navionics or anything like that.
Yep.
And it's really good for if people do it on like backwaters and rivers and places like that these commercial maps can't get into. That's where you really get some real gems sometimes. If they find some dredge holes or some channels and backwaters, that can be really juicy stuff that you can find, or find where you can run in, things like that you would otherwise wouldn't know.
Exactly. So I'll get back to the map real quick. So we'll stay in Halstead's Bay, but you can see here. So I'm going to turn off the depth layer and I'm going to switch to, the hardness. So this is our bottom hardness layer. You can see that we overlay the contours on there, and you can see the hard spots are going to be those spots with the contour changes.
So is that
right here
overlaid on the CMAP, or is that overlaid on the generic map?
Looks like the C map.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, as you would expect, points that stick out, humps that stick up, those are going to be the ones where you're going to have your harder bottom. But the really cool stuff about this is, if you're fishing a shoreline or something like that, you might have an area that has hard bottom on it. Let's see. So like this shoreline, for example, you can see this particular area might not have a ton of hard bottom present, but for some reason this spot does. So maybe you go from like a sandy to a muddy transition here. So rather than spending your whole time fishing this entire point or this entire shoreline, you just kind of focus in on this, or you can eliminate certain parts of from the comfort of your home and not have to go and scan the whole thing. And potentially with this all being covered in vegetation, you can. I guess that's a good segue into our next point here. But you can see there's vegetation all over that deal. So when it's summertime, you're not going to be able to scan through the vegetation and read the hard bottom. So it's nice to have that layer at your disposal as well.
So if you're a milfoil flipper,
correct,
if you can combine those, is there any chance that at some point that you could be able to look at the vegetation and the hardness at the same time, or is that not physically possible?
Possibly. I mean, I think anything's possible at this point. If there's enough want for that, I'm sure we could implement it somehow. But to have, I mean, we could probably do a different shade of vegetation, a different shade of green, or, have the transparency of it so that we can overlay with this. But I'm sure it's probably doable.
Right. Because I think there's a lot of people known to go out and scan Minnetonka before the grass grows up to figure out where the hard spots are, so then they can go back and look to see if the milfoil grow over those spots, and then those would be prime areas to flip and spend their time dinking and dunking versus just randomly flipping all the milfoil. If you can flip during hard spots, so those are going to be high percentage areas to find schools of bass and foil.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret. As soon as the ice comes off, some guys break ice to get out into the lake to go and scan before all that vegetation grows in. But you can see Tonka's got grass all over it, and these are typically, anywhere from 0 to 15 to 18 foot of water is where that grass is going to grow, that coontail, everything like that. So if you can find the areas.
This is generated by CMAP as well, right?
Correct. Yep.
So in theory, this stuff does update.
Yep. So when people are using or when they're recording their sonar logs for CMAP, there's a couple pieces of information or points of information that they're taking in all at the same time. I think there's like 5. I can only list 3 at the top of my head, but it's depth, it's bottom hardness, and then presence of vegetation. So those pieces of information are being recorded at all times when these people are recording their sonar logs. So that's where you're able to, implement all these different things into a map and then have different layers that you can use. So pretty cool stuff. And
I think, the one thing you couldn't do here, right? We can look at this at satellite view instead of standard view, right? And then you'd see docks when you zoom in, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can see some docks.
Yeah, I guess the green's kind of covering it up a little bit.
Yeah,
I guess that's just the way it's, but
yeah. So then the next layer I can touch on is water temperature. This is pretty cool. Coverage, like I said, it's going to be varying because so we derive this reading through satellite imaging. So you can see we've got lakes all across Minnesota. We've got readings on all of it and everything like that. So we can look at Waconia right now. So it looks like it's in the 70s still. But if we go back to Tonka, you can see like there's a huge section here that's not reading or that doesn't have any coverage. And a lot of that is just cloud cover that gets in the way of the satellite reading. So with further in the future, as we update the app, we will have previous past history readings that we can showcase too. So you'll be able to see, kind of trends, whether it's if it was 75 on Monday and today is Wednesday and today is 73, you can kind of guesstimate that, you know, it was 74 on Tuesday or something like that. But you can go through previous history or historical data to figure out those water temperatures. And it's pretty cool. I think one of the ways that we really saw this play this year was during the red crest. So BPT had their red crest on Lake Norman, and that was back March, second week of March, something like that, spawning deal. And we pulled up our map and we could look at the historical data at the time. But the guys that were doing well in that tournament were all fishing the south end of the lake. And the reason was warm water was down there. And the only reason there was warm water down there, which is crazy in most parts, because the dam, you know, you think the further away you get from the dam, you know, the warmer the water is, the further north you run, you know, you get that south facing stuff, you know, it's going to be warmer up further away from the dam. But if you had fished Norman, if you have local knowledge on that lake, it turns out there's a warm water discharge at the south end of the lake. And so like 9 out of like the 10 guys that were in the top 10 were fishing that south end because they knew of that warm water discharge. And we were able to pull it up on our map and see it. I don't even remember where Norman is. Is this Norman? Yeah, Norman's here. So I mean, you can't tell right now, but right in this section, there's a warm water discharge, and this entire section of the lake was like 8 to 10 degrees warmer than the rest of the lake, and that's where all those fish were spawning. So
which
a lot
is
of the guys
counterintuitive because usually it's the northern stretches of the lakes that warm up first.
Correct. So yeah, you, like I said, if the guys that were fishing in that derby had satellite water temps, they would have known that. But you know, you live and you learn. So
it can be good in the spring, right? You can be looking for bays that warm up earlier. You can kind of get a feel for, and I think even in the fall, there are certain bites. Like I think the guys that go up and fish those Cisco chasers up by Hayward and some of those lakes, they know that bite really doesn't start till the water temps dip below 45 or 48, right? So
Yep.
you could be looking at, you know, and I want to think like the musky fishermen that go up and chase the, what is it, the Tulibi spawn on,
Yep.
you know, Mille Lacs, like
Yep.
that doesn't start until the water temperature hits a certain level below, right? So it can save you a lot of time and, you know, that kind of stuff based on the bites you're chasing. That's a good
For
question.
sure.
And how, you know, how often the satellite temps update?
It's daily. Yeah, it's daily. So yeah, to that point, you know, I think this is, you know, water temps obviously going to be a huge player in the springtime, especially the guys that are traveling around or fishing lakes. You know, I think of like the guys that are on tour, you know, on the Elite Series, BPT, the Opens, Toyotas, Tackle Warehouse Invitationals, that sort of deal, where they're going from lake to lake and trying to figure out, okay, are these fish ready to spawn yet? Are they post spawn? Are they pre spawn? Water temps is going to be huge for that, and then also for those northern anglers. You know me, I love Mille Lacs. I love chasing them when that water gets cold, and you know when that water hits 52, you know it's like, okay, it's on. You know they're getting ready to chew, and you know being able to pull up lake temperatures and see, you know, obviously Mille Lacs being an hour and 40 minutes away from me, you know, I can just look at this and have an idea. Okay, you know, it's been blowing, it's been cold for the last week. I'm curious to see what the water temperature is right now in the lake, and I can just pull up the app, find it, so I don't waste my time. Not like I'm not going to go catch fish if I go out there, but I can really know if they're going to start chewing or not. So really cool thing to have.
Like, do I keep my tubes on, or do I like cut those all off and put football jigs and Minnesota rigs on and like?
Yep. Is it a blade bait bite yet, or am I still stuck throwing a jerk bait? You know, that sort of deal. So, because yeah, those fish, they love eating metal when it's cold. So, you know, generally speaking, you're not going to throw a blade bait when it's 65-degree water out there. But you can. Not saying you can't. Next thing would be water clarity. So the clarity layer is satellite derived as well. So this is going to show you different gradients of, you know, what the water looks like from the surface. So blue is, you can see, I guess that's not water temperature, but dark blue is going to be very clear. As you get into these greens and these yellows, that's going to be more stained. Would you say you're a river rat, Rich?
Decent amount. I was gonna say like I would say that I was gonna say that like most of Minnesota is really boring to look at on water clarity. When you look
Hmm.
at lakes, they all look really blue.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
in other parts of the country, this is much more important.
yeah, 100%. So, if you're familiar, Prescott, Wisconsin, where the St. Croix hits the Mississippi, you can see Mississippi is nice and muddy. It's dirty. It's going to show that color gradient differently. St. Croix is a stained body of water, but it's clear water. It's just brown. And you can see here that this is that mud line from the Mississippi hitting the St. Croix. And if you pull up Google Earth, you'll see that as well. There's going to be a pretty distinct mud line right there.
Well,
And
I
as
can confirm I fished a tournament there
yep,
in July. No, June, July. And I caught them right where that green meets the light blue on that bank where that current met that mud line. There was Smalley sitting right there.
you're talking this deal right here.
No, right across from it on the minute the like just down like so where that green like right where that current would hit that other bank right there.
Oh, right here.
And you can see that mud line plain as day
Yep.
coming in the water. It's pretty
Mhm.
accurate from like obviously that trend of water I would say is very accurate what is depicted
For sure.
being on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this, like I said, we've got water clarity that runs, across the United States because this is all satellite driven data. Another place that
I got a couple of river tournaments coming up.
yeah.
In Prairie du Chien and out of Winona. And if we get rains in the fall and this stuff updates pretty quickly, there's potential that I can be using that like live almost and be like, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
That's blown out. Like that's not going to play.
Mm-hmm. So this is a place that I got to fish when I was in the opens. So you can see Fort Gibson Dam here, or Fort Gibson, as it feeds into the Arkansas River. Arkansas River is just chocolate milk. It's super dirty. And there's a huge mud line that sits right here where these two rivers run into each other. But then a lot of people in Oklahoma fish 10 killer because it's got smallmouth in it, and you can see it's much cleaner based off the water, based off the color gradient here. It's a lot cleaner than the river. And that's where those guys are catching smallmouth in that deal. So pretty cool stuff.
Right. But these are things you can look at going to a new lake. And even if it's not live, for when you're going, but like a lake like 10 killer, I would think you could look at and you could watch the backs of some of those pockets over time, and even like a Eufaula or something like that, right? And you would get a good understanding of which one of those, like if those creek arms always stay blue, then that tells you there isn't probably a live creek in the back of that.
Correct.
So like these ones like on Wild Camp Point, that means those ones probably don't have creeks in them. But if you go to the one to the left of Pellet Bay or whatever there, you can see there's some green in there, which leads me to believe that probably has some run in that creek.
Yep.
Which, at certain times of the year, early and late, that's important. And guys that
absolutely.
fish reservoirs and know how that affects bait and warming up water in the spring or having those shad push way in the back when they got fresh water late in the fall. Like those are all key things, and you can get a pretty good guesstimate at which, if you're looking for a run in or if you're looking for trash mats in the backs of creeks, those are really good indicators of where you're going to find those and save yourself driving into every single creek, with tools like this.
Yep, absolutely. So those are the core layers. We have weather layers as well. So we got weather radar, which is pretty cool. Standard. You can see cells moving around. Air temperature is another one. So the weather layers, you can stack them on top of each other and on top of a core layer. So let's just say you wanted to see depth contour. You can see the contour with the air temperature, so on and so forth. But this is where I was talking about having wind. So you can see the wind barbs and you can see how the particular waves should be pushed on a particular point, a hump, that sort of thing, how it's going to position bait. So really cool stuff here. Like I said, that's the wind contour. If you want to take off that's the wind layer. If you want to take off the depth contours, you can do that just so you can see how it's, hitting a certain area, that whole deal. A really cool one is lightning strikes. So we have lightning strikes as well. Let me zoom on. I don't think. Okay, so you can see here, got lightning strikes north of Grand Rapids, northeast of Lansing, south of Detroit, that whole deal. And if we put on the radar, it kind of matches to a degree. Here.
Looks like they might lag slightly behind the cells, but yeah.
Yep. So then we've got storm layer as well. So it's got these little cones that signify the direction that those storm cells are moving as well. But yeah, so all this, like I said, a lot of this is just for keeping people safe on the water, understanding storm cells, and if they're going to be pushing through a particular body of water that you're.
We even serve our friends in Canada, I see.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
There you go, Frank. We didn't forget you this time.
But yeah, so this is Premium Pro essentially. Like I said, this is we're early into this. We just launched it. Maybe it was kind of a soft launch last month, but now we're really trying to get the word out on it. But it's cool stuff, super awesome to use, and hopefully it helps people catch more fish. And yeah, we're going to get more coverage as soon as we can, and constantly looking to improve.
So there are things in the works, and I guess you don't have a timeline officially, right? But like to backfill the CMAP with another map vendor, right, or a map provider, so that. And I guess will that be another layer, or will it default based on?
I don't know for sure, but I would say we would probably default to that vendor partner for that map layer. And if you wanted to,
turn on the community layer to look at
switch over to CMAP to see if there's a more detailed coverage. You can definitely do that. So that's coming down the pipe. That's, I would say, hopefully a few weeks out at most. But yeah, it should be good to go pretty soon here.
Yeah, so this is just the Omnia fishing app, right? So a lot of us already have the Omnia app on our phone because we have tackle addictions, and we're using this to, place orders for flatworms and jig trailers and Bass Tech jigs and all kinds of things on the fly, getting, but then it's just another feature in there. So there already is so in the section where you would go and find like your lake reports and just maps, right? And then when you upgrade to the Premium Pro version, this is just another layer in that section.
Correct. Yeah. So
the app itself, the Omni app is free.
Yep.
Other than the potential impulse buys you may do for tackle purchases, which may not be free. Right. Addiction is such a weak word, Nick says. And then, so I think what the Omnium Premium, right? That's a level of service once you already have once you get an email sign up, right? So an account with Omnia, then you can add premium or just premium, right? And that's $19.99. No,
$29.99.
$29.99.
Yeah.
And that gets you 10% back on your purchases. It gets you expedited free shipping, potential bonus deals for members only.
Correct.
That's most of it, right?
Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. To that point, we do. Yeah, it's free shipping on all your orders. Doesn't matter if you order 1 bag of flatworms. If you want to buy 200 bags of flatworms, it's free shipping. And I think it's like $6 shipping. So super reasonable. You get 10% on your purchases. If you spend $300 a year on tackle, you're getting premium for free essentially. So, and then we do specials and deals for premium members only. A lot of the times you get early access to our sales. Sometimes we give you better deals than the public gets. So definitely worth it.
Like and the time that I got my Tatula SV for 30% off.
There you go. So good. It's well worth it.
And then so then the Premium Pro is another $20 after that if you already have the premium.
Correct. Yeah.
Or if you don't have premium, you can just go 50 and that gets you the premium included with your Premium Pro.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think I need a chart. We should have a chart. Like a
there's probably a page for it. Let's see.
So this is a good question. So for those of us that are long-term Omnia fans and several people in this chat are this, where their premium already goes out, maybe let's say until like March of 2024.
Yeah.
As an example, asking for a friend. Like,
Yeah.
so if you upgrade to the Premium Pro, does it even go out further, or how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'd have to check in on that. I want to say that we would just give you the extension of the Premium Pro from the day you subscribe to Premium Pro, and then we would chop off that extended 2025 premium. But I don't know off the top of my head. I could get that answer for you though.
Come on, Pete. Where are you, bud? All right.
But nonetheless, yeah, we're happy to make it work.
There you go. Dustin says his middle name is Trevor. So does that count for anything?
That counts because it's spelled correctly.
Nice. DTT. So there's a couple things I think that also we talked about. So I want to share something, because I actually used this a little bit when we were looking at. So this is a lake that I fished recently. So this is Lake Alexander. We looked at this on the stream a couple weeks ago. And so this is kind of the same section. So this point here, actually, is it? You have to tell me when it's not actually on the screen, Trevor, because I forget to add the button.
Oh,
so this point here, they're not exactly one for one, is this point here. So we got the vegetation map here and the hardness map, here. And I'll zoom in here. So I didn't really pay. I wish I would have looked a little harder at this. I had just gotten Premium Pro like the week before, and I kind of looked at it, and I didn't. But now looking in retrospect, I absolutely saw clear rocks up on the inside weed line of the milfoil, right where this red spot is.
That's really cool.
The tournament. Yeah. And this particular, I mean, you can see this is kind of firm bottom here, but relative to the area, you can definitely see it's a little harder in this section, right? Like, it's definitely not the most rocky part of the whole lake, but in this section, you can see that there's that little bit of orange, firmer bottom, and then there's a pretty good layer of vegetation here combined with the drops. And we actually did most of our damage of largemouth in the morning in this section right here. So, maybe if I would have paid a little more attention, I could have found that a little earlier instead of 10 minutes before I had to go in. I caught like one nice fish in this section, and then I ended up starting there in the tournament. But this is an example of, it can be used as a pre-fishing tool to hopefully point you in the right direction to start. But also, if you're just fishing, whether it's fun fishing or in a tournament, and you're like, we ran into them here, what was going on there?
Exactly.
Right? And then kind of say, oh, that is interesting, or if I would have found this earlier in practice, and if I would have paused and said, okay, I just, fished all day, caught plenty of fish, but all I was catching is 10 to 14 inches. And at the end of the day, I caught a 3.5 pounder here. And then in the tournament, we caught, plenty of 2 to almost 3 pounders right here. And it's like, okay, now I could have backed out, right, and said, what was, and then look for that, looking at those layers through the rest of that lake. So I think that's interesting, that I think that could be, that's something you can go back, even like if you've got a decent memory, right, to say like, hey, pick an open, pick Grand, pick when I went down to Pickwick, pick when I was fishing a river tournament where I almost got into something, or I found something late, or I had a really good day and I was like, you know what? I stumbled into those fish on that island or that point or that whatever. Now let's go back and dissect that and analyze it beyond just the depth contours, but look at, okay, what does the vegetation look like? What does the hardness look like? What do some of the other things, the layers look like? Maybe there's something on the C map that wasn't on my Navionics, that wasn't on my LakeMaster, and start to learn and go, okay, now when I go back there, or when I go to another lake that's a similar style, I can use that and say, hey, when I see these 3 or 4 ingredients together, I need to look for that, because that was special.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Anything that can help us try to, I guess, further break down why we caught fish somewhere, why we didn't catch fish somewhere, looking back in hindsight is definitely something that anglers are going to find useful. I think of my time fishing the Classic on Grand. That year that we fished it, the winter before that, we had record high rains, flooding, and the entire lake was dirty as can be. And the spot that Edwin Evers wanted out of was way up the Elk in like gin clear water and catching 6 pounders with a finesse jig, and so um, I think of all these different things that you could use, whether it's the clarity layer, or he said that he found those fish in practice. He knew they were there, but he needed the conditions to be right, and he needed it to be blown a little bit. So having the wind layer come into effect, and using that to see that, okay, if I can survive to day 3 of the tournament, it's going to be blowing 15, 20 miles an hour in the right direction for me to go catch those clear water fish. So a lot of these things can come into play, and allow you to capitalize on, whether it's a tournament or if you're just out fun fishing.
Absolutely. So I guess, to full circle now, right? We've arrived at the lake, right? Like, so I think the Omnia app for an extra, I think a lot of people in this chat already like premium guys. So like that extra
Sure.
$20 is like pretty easy. Like for that $20, like, to be able to, like, you catch a couple, we spend $20 on topwaters and jerk baits or a handful of jigs that we may or may not ever catch a fish on. So if it puts a couple
Correct.
fish in your boat, it seems like a pretty good deal. Or on top of the safety stuff of the weather, I think
Yep.
that's pretty cool. So we get to the
Well,
lake, right? We've done our. Go ahead, sure.
No, I was just saying, I think what helps is to put everything in one spot, so you're not flipping through 4 different apps on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And just, to that point is just being able to layer them on top of each other. You have your core layers and the other layers, and just so that you can see, how the wind's blowing on this particular this bay, or is this bay going to get hit by a storm on Tonka? Can I fish the rest of the bay and miss the storm? That sort of deal. So
Is this app available on tablets as well? The Omni app?
yeah,
Do you know?
yeah, it's
Yeah. So if you're one of those people that wants to mount like an iPad or an Android tablet,
100%.
like you could absolutely use this almost as a graph on your boat pretty inexpensively.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's
You'd have to have it on
available on
Wi-Fi
Android.
or a plan, right? But
Correct. Yeah, it's available on Android and iOS. So anything that uses that, whether it's the Google Play Store or the App Store, you can get the Omnia app on it.
it'd be interesting to see if any of these graph makers actually like integrate Android or Apple. I guess it would more likely be Android into an
Probably.
interface. It couldn't be that hard to do, could it? Like, I'm surprised nobody's done that yet.
That's a foreign language to me.
I don't know, right? You already got a touchscreen on like Solixes and HGSs and all that stuff. Like, we're just talking about. It can't be that hard. They would be more expensive, right? But like, the hardware is almost all the way there. Like, what are we really talking about? Maybe another $500 to a unit to make it like basically a built-in tablet.
Potentially, I don't know if you'd need like a HDMI plug-in or something like that.
Yeah, and it's like a kayak, right? I think like just like a little phone mount. You're right there. Like that's all you need, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like let's take this to the, we talked about this as a research tool, a post-mortem tool, and on the lake tool, but like what other things when you get to a lake, what do you like to do, Trevor? Do you like to like take a spin? Do you already have like kind of idea of a milk run based on your research? I want to hit this point in this cove. Like, how do you break down a new lake once you get there? Do you come in with a plan, or do you just like to kind of roll around and see what looks good, and how do you attack things?
Generally, I'd like to at least take a look at contour maps beforehand. I'm a big offshore guy, and sometimes it burns me because, a lot of the times, big fish are caught up shallow in grass. And I don't know. I think it like I said, it hurts me at times where I think dock fishing is not sexy. So I don't do it as much as I probably should. But I like to look at a contour map and kind of get some offshore stuff that I want to go and look at. And then, like I said, Google Earth, trying to figure out any sort of little knickknack stuff that might stick out or it might be an oddity to that lake. That's kind of the stuff that I'm looking for. And then, yeah, go make that little milk run, and just start fishing.
Yeah. So do you like to? So you kind of have a plan? Like I definitely want to check this hump and this point and this turn, and
Yep.
and you're gonna kind of like what? Are you gonna buzz it quick with 2D, and are you just gonna slow down and idle it and scan it with side scan? Like how do you like to break down water once you're there?
Yeah, generally it's side imaging. I'm gonna go, and if it's a point, I'll drive over what I think is gonna be the best. Dock fishing is super sexy. Yeah, especially when you ding a half-ounce jig on a pontoon. Um, yeah, it's usually side imaging. And nowadays with 360, if you think that a certain spot on that point on the contour looks the best, I might just roll up and drop the trolling motor down, because that thing is basically side imaging. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's usually what I would do. One thing, like I said, I think it takes less time to side image than to go and drop the trolling motor down and read the 360. So, if there's no vegetation or if it's a point that, has no cover on it, it's just some random point that's just nothing but sand. If I'm not seeing anything, I might just skip over it and I don't even waste making a cast.
Yeah. Uh, it depends on the side of the lake too, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes I do like to just like a lot of our lakes in Minnesota, not like Tonka, but a lot of these other lakes, like that Lake Alexander Lake that I was on, that was a couple thousand. A lot of times you can just kind of do a hot lap around the lake and kind of get a feel for like, hey, I see some pads back there. I see some reeds over here. Like kind of like this looks like a shallow slot bay. This water looks a little deeper and cleaner over. You can kind of just like, hey, get a lay of the land to kind of reconfirm some of that stuff you see on Google Maps. Sometimes it's good just to kind of cruise around and get a feel for before I really get serious about graphing. I like to maybe just like do some 2D and like what is the grass? Is the grass stopping at 8? Is it stopping at 18? Is it going out to
Right.
24? Am I
Hmm.
seeing bluegills? Right by the ramp? Is it clean? Sometimes I like to just kind of like look around and do some 2D kind of quick surveillance before I really start graphing to kind of get a feel for like, hey, what's going on? Where am I seeing bait? Like, and then I can kind of take like a lake master and like, hey, I'm seeing bluegills. They're sitting at 6 feet down. They're sitting 18 feet down. You can kind of maybe like guesstimate where I should be looking. Should I be scanning in 6 feet of water? Should I be scanning in 16 feet of water?
Hmm.
So I think before I start scanning, sometimes I like to do just a little bit of like 10,000 foot before I start like really like digging in.
For sure. Yeah, I think to that point, it kind of depends on where you're fishing. I do a ton of fishing up in Mille Lacs, and so early springtime, you think of smallmouth, you're cruising up shallow, that sort of deal. So a lot of the times, I'll leave the outboard running, and I'll just put it in forward, and I'll just let it idle, and I'll jump on the trolling motor, drop it down, and I'll use the trolling motor just to turn left and right. Basically use the outboard to push me faster than my trolling motor would take me. Um, and just cruise and stand and look and try to find fish that are cruising or wolf packs or that sort of deal. And all the while, with the graphs being all networked and everything like that, you can still side image while you're doing that. So, if you see fish on transition or fish on, like a sandy flat or a drop off or that sort of deal, you're kind of eliminating two birds with one stone. You can use your eyes to see visually some fish that are cruising up shallow if that's what you're thinking they're doing this time of year, or you can use your eyes underwater with your electronics at the same time by networking and seeing what your back graph is showing you on your front graph.
Sure. That's a good point, Tim. Like, yeah, 20. Like, if you do some research on the
Yeah.
Premium Pro, you could easily save more than $20 in gas in a year. That's not a lot of gas,
not
especially
not
I don't know
today.
about your boat, but my boat, it's not much.
No.
Um,
Yeah, mine I think he gets like 4 miles a gallon. Something like
yeah.
that. So Probably
or 4
less if
gallons
I'm
to the mile.
right. Probably less if I'm really running. So
Should we get a layer with food reviews for great places to have lunches on
yes,
lakes?
absolutely. Yep. 100%. We should do that.
Like, should I go to Nitty's or should I go to
The boathouse.
the boathouse? Yeah,
You
that's
been there?
Twin,
They got
Max Twin.
yeah. They make a
The state
good
tournament went out of
walleye
there that
sandwich.
one year. I don't know that I think I had a couple beers there. I don't know that I had any food. No, we went
Yeah.
and had some apps. I think one day maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of the times I'll take a stop midday to do like a lunch break with clients out there. We'll do a lunch, and get you a walleye sandwich, tartar sauce, some fries. Good for the soul.
I'm too hardcore for that. I can't.
I'm not fishing when the clients are out, so it's nice to
Yeah.
recharge.
No, I'm saying like if I hired a guide on a lake, I'd want to
Oh
fish
yeah,
the
yeah,
entire 8 hours. Like I don't.
for sure. Yeah.
I mean, sure,
Yeah.
if it's lightning, let's go and have a walleye
Yeah.
sandwich and a Bloody Mary. But
Yeah.
other than that,
Yeah. It depends on the client. Some guys are, we'll grind it out for 10 hours straight. Others are like, let's just lay back. We'll put on some Jason Aldean.
I've got a couple 4-pounders. I could go for a sandwich. Like
Yeah, for sure. Kick back, put your feet up, listen to Spotify on your little Bluetooth speaker. Yeah. So
this is interesting. I think opacity of layers could be good for taking notes.
I think that's kind of alluding to using the bottom hardness with the vegetation layer at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that could be something we look into. So I can take that to our dev team and suggest that for sure.
Nice. This could be your future, Trevor.
My teen
This is
daughter
basically
tells me the
this is what my
Bassmaster
daughters think of
dumb.
fishing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be the one to push my daughter to fish if she doesn't want to fish, but I will introduce her to it. I'll introduce her to hunting, that sort of deal, but I'll leave it up to her.
We're getting into people's eating habits on fishing now.
Yeah, I generally don't eat much if I'm fishing too. But yeah, if I'm guiding, like a lot of the times I'm working the trolling motor and sitting back and letting people make casts. So if they want to stop in for some food, when you're not catching fish, that's when you get hungry. And generally, when you're guiding, you're not catching fish. So yeah.
So I guess how often do you typically? Are you the kind of guy that can let's put like if you're going to a tournament lake when you're in tournament mode, are you like how long do you typically graph before you fish, or are you like graph a little bit, fish a little bit, graph a little bit, fish a little bit? Like how do you approach? Because it seems like a lot of the anglers that are like the best at what they do at the top level will graph literally for almost their whole practice and fish very little. But what's your approach and what have you found works for you?
Well, I'm definitely not the top tier angler.
Right.
I have no problem admitting that. So I do a little bit of graphing and a little bit of fishing. Depending on how much practice time I have, when I was fishing the opens, I'd like to try to get there at least and give myself like 4 or 5 days of practice, especially with these being huge bodies of water. So it's it's a little bit of graphing, a little bit of fishing. If I get onto a pattern, then I'll just start graphing like crazy and try to replicate those spots. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I wouldn't say that I'm confident enough to say I'm graphing. I know bass. I want to go and pull on one of them and make sure it is a bass. And to kind of gauge the size of it because you can see dots on a graph and everybody will try to toot their own horn about how I can tell a 5-pounder from a 2-pounder on my live scope or my side imaging. I know those are all 4s and 5s and 6s, but it's like I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just not there yet. But I'll go make a cast and see if I can't hook into one of them.
And I feel like there's a lot of hidden fish in Minnesota. Like can you see fish on your graphs in Minnesota? Yes. But in our grass lakes,
not so much.
Not all the time. Right? You could drive over the mother lode and not even know it. I feel like.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm much more of graph some, fish some, get a clue, and then try to, dial in my lake master, right? Okay, I got a good bite in, 10 foot, so I'm gonna, highlight
Yep.
8 to 12, go look at those areas, try to repeat the vegetation and kind of do it that way.
Yeah,
I like
for
to get
sure.
some responses, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you ever graph during tournaments?
Um,
I don't find myself doing that. I find that's hard for me to do. Like,
it's a multi-day tournament. I will. But if it's a single day tournament, I generally don't. I think most of my graphing needs to be done before that tournament starts.
yeah,
So yeah, unless I've got, if it's like if I'm on the St. Lawrence and I've got 23 pounds, 24 pounds, I might go
sure,
graph a little
for
bit.
sure.
But
Yeah.
if I'm on Tonka and I've got 13 and
That's
a
like
half,
saying,
I'm not
how
going to
often do you
graph.
throw glide baits in the tournaments? Oh, when I got 20 pounds in the boat, I like to pick it up and try for a big one.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
easy to make things happen when you've already got 20 in the boat.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, if I'm struggling out there, you won't find me graphing. Trolling motor's gonna be down. My head's gonna be down.
That's
Sure.
where the 360 is really nice. You can kind of
Mhm.
like fish fast and kind of side image and kind of like drop it down on a point and kind of fish and give it a look around, especially if
Yep.
you got front facing and a 360, you can kind of be fishing and
Yep.
like kind of taking it all in and spend 5-10 minutes on a spot and then hop. So that'd probably be
So
my preference versus just
I've got a
truly
question for
graphing.
you. You have front facing sonar on your boat.
Mhm.
So I talked to one of the guys at the office, and I was telling him that if if you're using your forward facing sonar and you're just looking for fish before you make a cast, do you feel you're wasting time on the water by not just making random casts while you're panning around with your forward facing sonar? Or
I think it depends in the situation.
yeah,
If you're out like fishing smallies, like I think like on a place like Green Lake out in Spicer, you can absolutely probably just drive around and cast at dots. And fishing, like casting when you're not seeing them, is probably almost a waste of time. But if you're fishing for largemouth and occasionally like seeing a blip stick out from a little weed point, I think then you're probably better off keeping the line wet while looking.
okay, yeah. I just kind of feel like if your line's not in the water, you're potentially missing out on fish. But I definitely understand the sentiment of, I'm not going to make a cast until I see a fish because I don't want to see a fish and then have to reel up my line real quick and waste, 10, 15 seconds getting my line back in the water to flip out to them. But yeah,
Yeah. And I
just
think
kind
like
of
St.
curious on
Clair
your,
was a prime example. St. Clair and Champlain this year in that style of fishing, I think you were probably wasting more time if you were casting and not casting at a fish.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
But I don't
I
think
think
we
you're
have a
right.
ton of that in Minnesota. Um, That's last tournament I fished on Lake Alexander. When I was largemouth fishing, I was watching my 360 and watching my live scope quite a bit, but I was flipping like a tube with like a 3/4, 5/8 ounce tungsten. So it was like,
Yep.
and I went with the
Yeah,
tube
it's
because
quick.
this was a smally largemouth fishery. So I kind of wanted to like ride that fence of like, could feel like pretty confident I get bit with both.
Yep.
But it also wouldn't take me long. Like if I was fishing a grass area, like I could flip out, land right on its head. And if
Hmm.
they didn't move or didn't react, maybe then I would reel up and make the next cast with a drop shot that I had sitting right there. But there was a
Sure.
period point in the day where I went out and slid out drop shot, like more in smallmouth areas where I had found smallmouth in practice. And there I found myself more waiting till I saw, but the areas I was in there was actually like you didn't typically spend much time not seeing a dot
Yeah.
to throw. I mean, there was a decent amount of fish in those areas.
Sure.
But there would be times where I wouldn't see nothing, but I would scan over and I'd see like a little thick clump, or I'd see like a little bigger rock, and I would pitch to those while then I would scan around. And sometimes I would pick up a fish off a weed clump or a rock that I did not see a blob
Right.
on and would get a bite on. So I think there is a balance there. But like if you're fishing like Champlain, where they were fishing like fish relating to bait over suspended water, at that
Hmm.
point, yeah, I think you were probably wasting your time casting out if you weren't seeing something.
Right. And that was kind of my thing is like, having your line in the water is always an opportunity for you to run into another fish. So I figured that was, you know,
And I think
I
in a
feel like
team
you're not
tournament is
being
different than a solo tournament also, right? Like in a
sure.
team tournament,
Yeah.
that guy behind can be like just like, farming with a small Kitek or, a Ned rig and just, kind of shotgunning, and you can be more like rifle
Yep.
sniping per se.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
But if I'm in scout mode, like if I'm and I by no means am I no expert. I have only had my Garmin since September, which half that time was frozen. So I'm still learning a ton. But if I'm in the mode where I'm looking for fish, if I'm making casts, I'm between my 360 and my Garmin. If I'm going to make a pitch, I'm going to make it based on something I see. It may not be a fish, but I might be looking at a thick clump or a hole or
Yeah.
a tall, tall or low. I mean, like trying to make a high percentage cast at something. It may not be a fish, but I'm not just blindly a lot of times slipping into the grass. I'm more like, hey, there's something
Yeah.
different here. There's a bump, there's a high spot, there's something going
Right.
on.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's where you pair that 360 with your live scope. If you're panning that live scope looking for dots that are sitting outside those weed clumps, but you're not making a cast into the weed clumps unless you see a dot sticking out of it, I think you're wasting your time. I don't think you're making the most out of your
Or you're
time.
a lot better at than I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, with these grass lakes in Minnesota, I feel like you have to you could potentially be missing fish that are sitting in grass, if you're just
For
looking
sure.
for the ones that are sticking out like a sore thumb on your live scope. So
But there is something that, like, the more you look at it, the more your eye gets trained that you see that, like,
oh yeah.
little movement, that little blob, and you're like,
Hmm. Yeah.
I didn't see the whole fish,
It's
but I
like
saw enough there to think there was, so.
it's like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme. What? Sitting on the couch.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. What else? So we've been going about an hour and a half. I don't know. Were there any questions? Yeah, smallmouth tight to rocks.
Yeah.
I'd assume that, like, you have you have a Garmin or a front facing of some kind
Yeah, I
on your
got a live
boat.
scope. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what do you think, Mille Lacs? Like, is it easy to see fish? Are there a lot of fish hiding in rocks that you don't see? Like, or do you see a lot of times they react? You'll like flip to a boulder or a patch of rocks, and you'll see them come up at your
Yep.
bait, and you're like, oh, whoa.
That's usually what it is. Yeah, I think the bigger player on Mille Lacs for me personally is 360.
Mhm.
I'm maybe it's just the way I grew up fishing. I'm a cover structure fisherman. I'm not necessarily looking for fish because to that point, I've seen plenty of times where you'll go and scan or put 360 down and you got four boulders, big boulders next to each other, and you'll go point your live scope at it and you can't see a fish on there. But as soon as you make a cast with a Ned rig or a drop shot or something like that, it's like they all just come right off the bottom.
Right.
So
What it can give you, though, when you stacks now, right? Like, you used to be looking at 360, and you're like, well, I'm making the right cast with this Ned rig,
yep.
and there's usually fish there, but for some reason I'm not getting bit. But now the
Hmm.
live scope might show you, like, well, those fish came up and they looked at that Ned, but they didn't eat it. So, like, do I need
So
to change color? Do I need to go heavier? Do I need to go lighter? Do I need to show them a drop shot? Do I need to jerk a jerk bait? I mean, right? Like, it can give you that, like,
yeah.
okay, they're here. I made two casts with the net. It didn't work. Now I have to change something, right? So, like,
Hmm.
that's the thing that, like, it can really stack. Even though you can't see them or find them, they will. You see how they react to their bait, and it's like all of a sudden you can start to, like, process information so much faster.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Being a guide, having live scope is one of the best, I guess, confidence boosters for your clients because back in the day, if you didn't have live scope, you could say all you want. We caught fish here yesterday, or we were just here, blah blah blah, catching fish. But now you can actually show them the graph, and be like, "That's a fish right there. I'm not lying to you. There are fish around here." And a couple years ago, I had when I just got my live scope, we ran out to a big point, and we were fishing and marking fish with a live scope, and then we would fire a Ned rig out there, and it's right on its head, as it's going down, it hits right in front of them, and that fish would just take off, gone, get out of there. you know, and we're like, what the heck's going on? So we did that with like 3 or 4 fish. And I'm like, something's off here, you know? And so your standard, you know, turd, I took it off and I put on a turd craw instead. I was like, maybe we change the profile, something might change. Every single fish we saw after that we caught. You know, and I don't think, you know, without live scope, you know, I probably could have figured that out later if I didn't have live scope. You know, maybe, you know, you're fishing half the day and you're like, why the heck are these fish biting? There should be fish around here, blah, blah, blah. But with live scope, we figured out within 15 minutes, you know, seeing 3 or 4 fish run away from the bait, that we know something is wrong with this bait, you know, or something is wrong about this, that they don't want to touch it. And we switch the profile up and they start eating every single one that falls down. So
Yeah,
pretty cool.
Last year, late in the year, I went out like November 12th, which was like the last day when we had that like 70-degree day, and it like was 70 degree at noon, and by 5 o'clock it was like 30 degrees, and then it was like ice the next week. And I was fishing Marion, which is like my least favorite lake, but anyways, I didn't have a lot of time. Went out there fishing, and I was catching northerns like on a lipless crankbait around grass, and
Sounds about right.
And I could see other fish like blobs moving in and out of the grass patches. And so then I started flipping a jig, and I could see fish kind of move around my jig, but they weren't eating it. So then I tried slow rolling a chatterbait. Similar thing where I could see them kind of moving, but I wasn't getting any bites. So then I went to a jerkbait, and then I realized right out of the gate I could see my jerkbait on my live scope, and I was like, whatever, 3 feet above the grass. It's a standard 110. And I was like, this is like 40-degree water. That's with largemouth. That's probably not close enough. So then I like made 2 or 3 casts, and I was like, we're not getting close enough. I went to a rearrange plus MR, and instantly could see like, oh man, my bait's like going through the tips of like the coontail and milfoil. And literally as I cleared the first patch, boom, it was a pike. But then like a few casts later I caught a nice bass, and like I was like I started catching pike and bass like at a much higher rate by making those bait adjustments based on that. Like I could have literally probably gotten skunked that day without it. Not being able to make those bait adjustments, because I was only out for a few hours, and like there was no way I'd make that progression as fast as I did. Like that was all within like 20 minutes to make all those progressions.
For sure, especially, you know, if you're fishing by yourself too. You know, if you've got, you know, 2 or 3 guys in the boat, you know, and everybody's throwing something different, you know, then you can start to figure out, okay, they're eating this guy's bait better, let's all switch over to that, or so on and so forth. But if you're fishing by yourself, you know, like I said, this is just another tool that helps you be more efficient on the water. I don't think it's cheating by any means. I don't think it's unfair. Half of everybody has live scope nowadays, and the other half is the one that complained about live scope. So I think it's just another tool to help you catch more fish in the water and understand fish behavior. I think that's probably the most of what I've gotten out of having a live scope on my boat, is just seeing how fish react to specific things. So
absolutely. I didn't do that. There should be a link in the description of the video, but I also just put it in the chat here. So if anybody that'll get you through the website. And then you can follow that to the App Store. But otherwise, you can just search Omnia in your app, or if you already have the Omnia app, you can go to like the map section, right, and find this stuff. So that's how to get it there if you're looking for it. What else is it? Any other questions that we haven't answered about the app, or Brian wants to know where you guys fishing this week? I might sneak out somewhere local this week. I was thinking about trying to make a jaunt down to the river, but I think I'm just going to wait and go the 3 days before the tournament rather than driving back and forth to Prairie du Chien several times. But I don't know. Are you getting out? You the boats fixed? Like what's the plan?
Yeah, the boat's working. So fingers crossed that it stays working. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe run up to the pond. You know, I haven't been fishing out much. A lot of what we've been doing is just content for Omnia right now. So we got out last week and pulled on a few fish, but you know, one of my little juice holes that just wasn't fishing the way it usually does for some reason. But yeah, so I don't know, maybe get out to the pond. I'm gonna be fishing that city auto glass derby up there.
Oh, sure.
So might want to go see what those fish are doing.
Nice. When's
So I
that
don't
coming
just
up?
go blind. 16th, so 10
Okay.
days next Saturday. So that'd be kind of fun. Haven't fished
Nice.
a derby on Mille Lacs in years, so generally you can't keep them up there. Well, this one is just
Sure.
it's length. They convert it to weight. So I don't know how true that is. You could catch a 6-pounder that's 20 inches, and some guy catches a 4.5 that's 21 that
Yeah,
weighs more. So
for
oh well.
sure. Yeah, so here's a fun one. I went. I had a my 360 actually shorted out on me. I dropped it off at Intune after that tournament, and I wasn't sure what it was, but it stopped working. So I had them kind of sleuth it out a little bit, and picked it up on Thursday night. Awesome for them to turn it around for me at Intune. Hats off to those guys. But I stopped on a lake on the way home that the year before I had fun on, little lake out west, like halfway back from Richmond, and it just wasn't like I pulled up and I'm the only one there, and I'm like, that's weird, but it's a Thursday night and we have 10,000 lakes. Sometimes you pull up a lake, nobody's there, but I was like, okay, nobody's here. I get out and like things are looking good. Like the water looks good, the pads look good, like the grass looks good, and I like fish like 4 or 5 docks, slow my roll a chatter. I mean, this is not a pressured lake, right? Like
Yeah.
slow roll a chatterbait across some pads, and I'm just not getting bit, and I'm not getting bit, and I'm not getting bit, and I'm like, I catch one scrawny like 13-incher on a Carolina rig, and I try to go out deep right before I had to head in, and then run into a guy at the dock, and his little kid catches like a 4-inch bass, and then he catches a bluegill. He's like, "Oh man, that's awesome!" It's like, I thought this lake winter killed. It's like, no, I think it did.
Yeah. Well,
That's the sad part where we live. These little gem of lakes are very susceptible to winter kills and bad winters, and
mhm.
and we need a you know we had the I don't you guys don't do the do you guys still do the tournaments on Omnia list?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we need a winter kill list on Omnia. Because there's
Yeah.
nothing more frustrating. That is the second lake I've shown up this year and spent time on it at a winter kill.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that might be something to note, for sure. Maybe we somehow partner with the DNR to get that information or something. But yeah, to that point, that little juice hole that I went to the other day to film content, I was like, yeah, we're gonna go catch him. However, we want to catch him. We want to film football jig content. We can do that. We can film Carolina rig content. We can do that. We can throw a chicken. We can throw a swimmer. Blah blah blah. Do whatever. Live scope them. And I was trying to film a promo for some Outcast stuff that we got coming up. And I was like, yeah, let me I told our content guy Fergus, I was like, yeah, Fergus, we'll just roll up to the stretch of docks. I catch them here all the time. There's grass right on the edge of these docks, and they're always sitting in those clumps, and I was like, I'll just throw a swim jig by them. We'll catch 4 or 5 of them. We'll do this little promo take 3 or 4 times, however many, to make sure that we got it good. Pull up to the first dock, fire both sides, every which angle, not a fish. That was weird. Second dock, not a fish. Third dock, not a fish. I'm like, what is going on here? And so I started just fishing the edges of the grass clumps. Nothing. Didn't get a bite. I fished like 7, 8 docks. Didn't get a bite. And I was just like, dude, what is going on with this lake? And ran out to the rock hump in the middle. Ran out to some grassy hump with some rock on it in the middle as well. Couldn't catch a fish on a jig. Couldn't catch a fish on a drop shot Senko. Couldn't catch a fish, throwing a small Kitech around either. And I was like, what in the world's going on? And yeah, they just weren't eating. I don't know. They were there. I mean, you could see them on live scope, and so we ended up just little 3-inch spark shad in his face, dangling in his face, and you'd get bit. But it wasn't the way we wanted to catch him, So that's how content goes sometimes when you're trying to go.
Just when you think you're gonna force something, that's when it backrides.
Exactly, 100%.
So. Yeah, Frank, we had a shout out for the Canadians. You have to watch the replay. Nick says, great show. Greg says it will be used. Awesome. It did not start with a C. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. Last call for questions. We're rolling up on 2 hours. Trevor's probably got to get up early and work on his fantasy team tomorrow. So
Yeah. Cooper Cup's out. Well, that's Sunday. I've got a couple guys playing tomorrow, but this is the Omnia media tour right now we're going through. So I appreciate you having me tonight. I've got another podcast and I'm jumping on tomorrow, and I've got a couple more next week. So I'm making my rounds, I guess.
It's a way to make me not feel special, Trevor. Thanks.
Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah. Champ Sierra 734 is Champ. I like the Sierra better, but they're both pretty good chatterbait rods. I think they're both very versatile rods. Both can do a lot. I have both. I like them both. I throw more swim jigs on my Champ 734, and I tend to throw a chatterbait more on my Sierra 734. But can't go wrong with either one, honestly. So cool. All right. We'll wrap things up. If you came in late, I think we gave we toured the Omnia Premium Pro app, but I also think we gave a lot of other good nuggets, regardless of whether you ever sign up for the app or not. A lot of good nuggets. So if you come in on Facebook or YouTube, I think the replay is well worth a revisit. Or if you search HellaBass on your favorite podcast app and listen to the sweet tones of Tilo and myself giving some tea.
Sweet tones.
Any other parting words, Trevor?
I've been told I have a face for radio, so
there you
go. I think you alluded to the sweet tones there. Next time I get on with you, I'll work on adding a little more bass into the voice so that we can elaborate on the sweet tones a little more.
So there you go. Trevor recommends MP3 audio only. All right. Well, maybe we can sneak out this fall. But as always, here to help you guys catch more big bass and suck less.